Hey everyone, Seth at Hub City Vintage, and today I get to share with you a true Seiko first. As a culture, we admittedly love firsts. They are a cornerstone and the foundation of watch history, and that is a timeline bursting at the seams with milestones, and just as important are the names stitched into them. You probably know the first waterproof watch, arguably the first automatic chronograph, and the first watch on the moon. The history of every brand is a bullet-pointed list of achievements and firsts, and that's often what determines our perceived position of those brands within a hierarchy of importance to the industry and to collectors. Firsts are also important to us. We remember our first watch purchase, our first rare collectible, and of course, something like this, the acquisition of our first grail. Now, Seiko may have too many firsts to count, and they are a brand that has thrived on innovation and a determination to gain recognition on a playing field where, if we're honest, the referees skew in favor of the Swiss. Now, they're built on an island nation, okay? It shouldn't be any surprise that a large section of Seiko heritage is their contribution to the history of divers' watches. Now, there were setbacks, of course, but from them came great successes. If we look at the first 300-meter divers, the very short-lived 6215-7000, and its follow-up high-beat 6159-7001, Seiko had to have been very proud of those watches, and they likely seemed impenetrable, but that was likely part of the problem. Wearers complained that at depth, built-up pressure from gases trapped inside could literally cause the crystal to pop right off of the mid-case. And, deep in the ocean is not the ideal place to learn that fact. And Seiko really took it to heart. Seiko spent the next 7 years in research and development of its next saturation diver, and oh boy, did they make the wait very well worth the while. The 6159-7010 grandfather tuna was the first diver's watch to be housed in a titanium case, and more than 20 patents were granted for its laundry list of other firsts. Seiko also created the world's first quartz saturation diver, the golden tuna, and the first computerized diver's watch, the Scuba Master. Earlier Seiko divers like the 6309 Turtle and the 6105 Captain Willard are absolute icons, and they are often the first pieces new converts are attempting to acquire. But the story of Seiko diving breakthroughs can be traced back to one watch. After dipping their toes in the water with the 50-meter Silver Wave in 1961, which was also our first introduction to the Tsunami logo caseback, Seiko began development of its first true diver, and in July of 1965 released the 150-meter 6217-8000, or 62 Mas. Now that name is a shorthand abbreviation for, of course, the 62 base caliber movement, followed by the MA from the word automatic, self-winder, and the S from self-dater, just meaning it has a date. So we take that 62, the MA from automatic, and S from self-dater, 62 Mas. The early 8000 had a very short production run. It was almost immediately replaced by the 8001, which was basically the same watch but featured a larger crown, the same crown shared with the 6105-8000, and a heavier embossing of the caseback markings. Now the case architecture is pretty familiar for divers' watches of that era. We have crisp corners and short sloping lugs that really just bring the dial and the bezel into focus. The lugs are drilled, makes for pretty easy strap changes or spring bar replacement. And there's also, this tight concentric circular brush finish on top that's pretty deeply engraved, and that helps to eliminate bright reflections and glare underwater. It's topped with a thin but well-balanced coin edge bezel, as you can see from the side. It's a count-up style, and there is a luminous pip at 0. It offers bi-directional rotation and no click, just a friction ring. The dial is a classic Seiko best. A rich smoky charcoal sunburst with a glossy lacquer finish and large rectangular applied markers. Each marker is a polished frame with a well of bright green luminous, and a framed date window is positioned at 3 o'clock. The hands are long and broad batons with ample luminous, and the sweep is thin and reaching, and there's a square luminous window right near the tip. The crown is easy to maneuver. The case back is a proper screw-down style. And like the 8000, the earlier 8001 featured Seikos. It's pretty worn here, but in some certain lights you can make it out. I'll see if I can capture it. Is the dolphin motif that was used up until about 65, 66. That really is how Seiko differentiated their water-resistant models. There we go. You can kind of see it there. Later in 67, of course, like most other Seikos of the time, they switched over to the horseshoe style caseback and did away with the dolphin. Housed inside is Seiko's 6217A, and that is a 17 joule, 18,000 BPH workhorse. No frills, just a solid bulletproof movement. Large rotor, large balance wheel. You can see this is in just phenomenal shape. This is also the same movement that was shared with the first World Time model in the year prior, 64, and would also go on to provide the foundation for the 62 Grand Seiko movements. Perhaps the biggest first worth mentioning is that this marks our first opportunity to present a 6217 8000. This is what's known as the small crown variant. As I said earlier, they were only in production for a very short period. And when I say short, I mean by the time the watch hit the public in July of 65, all of the 8000s produced were already made, and the 8001 was already underway. All of the known 8000 small crown models were produced in the 3 months of April, June, and July of 1965. If we turn over and take a look at the serial number, you can see just why I would get so excited about this one. So as you may already know, Seiko serial numbers are pretty easy to determine. If you know the decade in which a movement or a watch was produced, then you can take the first digit there, in this case a 5, and you know that that's 1965. Of course, the 4 beside it is going to be April. The way Seiko did their months was that 1 through 9, January through September, were all numeric, and October, November, and December were done with a letter. October O, November N, D for December. Beyond that was the production number of the watch. Here we have 00760. So this watch was created in April of 1965 and was the 760th watch off the line. The very first run of 62 Mosses ever created. I mean, I've not seen an earlier example of this watch, and I can only imagine that if there is one, there's just no way it's in this kind of condition. This may be the nicest, earliest example you'll likely ever see, and I just thought that was certainly worth mentioning in a video. If you have an earlier 62 Moss or one in better condition, please make a comment below. Send us a link to a picture or an album. We'd certainly, maybe we'll even share that in an upcoming video. We'd like to see, let's make it a competition. Show me your early 62 Moss and tell me if you think it stacks up. But certainly firsts are always worth talking about, and as it pertains to watches, I mean, we could do an entire video series based on just the firsts and what they mean to certainly brands and collectors. But this was a big one for us, and I was too excited to share it with you. Well, I hope you've enjoyed spending some time with me taking a look at this incredible Seiko first. And if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them below. If you liked our video, consider liking and subscribing. And you can also join us over at Patreon, where $7 a month gets you access to exclusive content, comprehensive rundown, sneak peeks of all of our upcoming inventory, and will qualify you for an occasional giveaway. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.